Thank you all for joining us. We are doing something a little bit different. We've never tried this before, and I thought this would be a good year to do this. But we are trying to bring in some experts to talk about these DECA topics and give you some insight into what you should be looking at as you get ready to go through your project and how you can approach this and maybe get a little bit of an edge over some of those other competitors who may not have this type of experience. So I am very excited to introduce our guest today. It's Kelsey Kitts Aamoth, and I know I've known Kelsey for a very long time. She is a former DECA member and one of my former students. So she's now working in the real world and back to help us out with this. She is a two-time state champion. Is that right, Kelsey?
That is right.
Twice. And of course, that makes her an ICDC qualifier 2 times as well. She worked for Procter & Gamble in sales and marketing and is currently the senior sales director at Quotient Technologies, which is a digital media and promotion company that specializes in hyper-targeted customer product campaigns. So this is a great opportunity to talk to someone who does this for a living and actually deals with this hyper-personalization. So welcome, Kelsey. Thank you for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me in. And DECA was probably some of my favorite memories from high school. So I'm excited to chat with you guys today.
Well, it is honestly some of my favorite memories as well from Kelsey's group. They were great competitors. They were very, very focused on what they wanted to do and very driven. And that was one of my favorite groups to work with as an advisor. So let's go ahead and get right into this. Kelsey, why don't you tell everybody what hyper-personalization is, what this means?
Yeah, it's funny. I thought this as you read off kind of my description of my job. I'm like, you know what, that kind of sounds very legit. And also kind of like, what on earth does that mean? So to really boil it down, what I do is I work with consumer products companies. So if you think about, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, Keurig Dr. Pepper, those are some of the clients that I've worked with. And what I do is I help them to design marketing, specifically digital media campaigns that help them reach the right audience. So for example, I could help the Coca-Cola Dollar General marketing manager to run a campaign for, if anybody noticed, they just launched a Coke Dream World a couple of months ago. So they had a hyper-targeted audience they wanted to reach. They wanted to reach Gen Z shoppers who've recently bought Coca-Cola and who shop within a Dollar General store. And what we can do is through all of our audience data that we own, we can create a hyper-personalized campaign to reach that ideal shopper that the marketing managers identify. And so, if we boil it down, that's the really of kind of how we do it. And then the data comes from a lot of different places that allow us to do that hyper-targeting.
So let's talk about where that data comes from and how you are able to get all of this information.
Yep. So what I will say is anytime you are working with consumer data, there is a lot of rules and regulations around how that data is used, as it should be, given a lot of kind of the data leaks and all of this that we've heard. So the way my company does it is we link to consumer purchase data. So if you think about it, everything that I said that we use for targeting has to do with transactions that go through a store. It's a shopper who has bought Coca-Cola, they've shopped in a Dollar General, and then oftentimes they will disclose their own age. That's how we get that data. How we get the bulk of our data is we have agreements with the retailers specifically. So with Dollar General, with Albertsons, and they actually, these retailers, if you think about it, have loyalty cards. Publix doesn't necessarily do this very well. Sometimes people can enter their phone number at a Publix, but if anybody shopped at a Kroger or an Albertsons, you'll have that key tag that everybody rings across the register. That's our way of getting data. Is the retailer collects all of that data as shoppers scan that card. And so we know which shoppers buy Coca-Cola, which shoppers buy Crest toothpaste, and then they sell that data to Quotient. Now, the reason this is legal is when you sign up for retailer loyalty cards, you sign a quick thing at the register that probably nobody ever pays attention to, but it says that the retailer is allowed to sell your purchase data to media companies such as my company.
Go ahead, Kelsey.
No, so that's really how we get the bulk of our data. There are a few other ways you can buy data from different companies and do things like that if you want to do more demographic targeting. So you want a Hispanic boomer male, you could buy that data, and my company does do that. But the bulk of what we do is through retailer purchase, and we find it very a highly accurate way to target.
Okay, you've touched on a couple of different things here that I really want to get into. So in marketing, students are taught how to target market: demographics, geographics, psychographics, behavioral characteristic. How does hyper-personalization change that approach to target marketing? What's different here?
I actually would love to know your answer to that. What I would say with how we operate is it becomes an and strategy. So it used to be back when I was at P&G, which was not that long ago, I pretty much could probably target based on really simple demographics. I could target Caucasian females. I could target moms, really simple groups that are very broad and likely not very accurate. Maybe I'm targeting moms, but are they moms with babies, moms with kindergartners? Those moms are going to buy different things. What hyper personalization is going to allow you to do is essentially have an and. So I want someone who is a mom and their kid is under 2 and they shop within Publix and, they have a high affinity to buy scented products. So they're going to buy this new scented diaper that Pampers is launching. I'm making this up. That's disgusting. But I have no idea. That was where my brain went for a moment. So it allows you to kind of cobble together all of this stuff so that you can get a really defined target. And as you think about a lot of the new products that brands are launching, this really helps them to reach that most accurate audience so that instead of me spending $1 million on media, which is frankly a small budget, to hit 20 million people, I can take that same $1 million and put it towards only the 5 million people of that 20 that I really think are going to buy this product.
And where are you going to find those people? So the type of customer you're looking for, the information that you want to know about them. Now, how do you actually reach them?
Yeah, so we reach them through their essentially IP address on their cell phone, because we deliver digital media. And so that allows us to, essentially know, somebody is a shopper of a specific product at a specific store, et cetera. So we essentially link all that data to their IP address. That's how we find the specific person. Is that what you're referencing? I'm not necessarily following there. Okay.
Yeah. So now we're kind of going back in the direction that you had touched on a little bit earlier with dealing with privacy and ethics. That's a big part of this particular project, is understanding what the concerns are when it comes to privacy and ethics here. So you've addressed privacy. What are the ethics of this process? You're talking about getting into a customer's IP address on their phone. That means you're tracking them basically wherever they are.
So here's what I would say is, yes, we could track them where we are. We are also what is called a DSP, which allows us to geographically identify where a shopper is. However, we are not using what I would call PII. Do you guys know PII? It's personally identifiable information. Think about information that would come off your driver's license, your social security card. We are not linking to somebody. We don't have, when I say I'm targeting, I have a shopper who shops at Dollar General and buys Coca-Cola and is a Hispanic Gen Z. I don't know that person's name. I don't have in my database their birthday. I would probably have their gender if they, when they signed up said they were a female, but they would have provided that information to me. What happens is when the data is sold, certain information is actually held back. And I mentioned we buy our data from a retailer. The retailer only provides us some of that information. So you would give, the retailer probably your name, your gender, and then they would basically get all of your purchase data. We essentially, instead of getting, name, birthday, gender, any of that personal information, what we would get instead is we would just assign, again, Hispanic, Gen Z, shopper of Dollar General, a random number. They are number 812744912. We don't know anything that could essentially be used to steal somebody's identity. Now, the retailer holds that information, but you willingly gave that information to the retailer.
But why wouldn't the retailer just be able to do this on their own? Why do they have to come to a company like you to do this?
The short version of that story is that they're starting to, and my company's changing our business model. But we can have a really, really fun strategic conversation about that a whole nother time. Just don't look at the stock price right now.
Okay.
There's the really. We'll call it.
All right. So retailers are already starting to collect all of this information. They're starting to curate it and put it all together and then do their own in-house hyper personalization.
Correct.
Okay. So that means that you guys are going to have to shift gears and find another way to add value to what they're doing and give them a reason to come to you guys. So that makes sense. So you talked about the IP address on the phone and you looked at the privacy and ethics of that. How do you use social media in developing these campaigns for your companies that you represent?
So we do a lot of social media buys. And those campaigns get really interesting because not only are we able to use our data that we have, but everybody as, a user profile on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is, they provide that platform with their own information. And that platform knows things you have searched or are interested in. So what happens is it can become a bit of an and strategy where we can actually layer together the targeting across platforms. And so essentially I could, let's again, just go back to this Coca-Cola Dollar General hypothetical campaign I was talking about. I could go and create a Facebook and Instagram social media campaign that targets Gen Z shoppers who shop at Dollar General, who have purchased Coca-Cola. And then within social media, they know your search history, things you follow, et cetera, and they categorize every profile as having interest in certain things. So you could have an interest in food and beverage. You could have an interest in sports. You could have an interest in this. Actually, it's you can Google like Facebook targeting categories and see all of the categories that you could potentially fall into. And so what you can start to do is I could create this social media campaign again, Dollar General, Gen Z, buyers of Coca-Cola who are food and beverage interested. And I could create an audience, merge these two groups together, and then essentially target that audience.
Okay. All right. I want to go to the students that we've got in here today. Do you all have any questions? I still have a couple more, but I want to turn this over to you because you guys came in here to gain something from this. Josh, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I was just curious how your company handles or with data and everything, how like the new California laws regarding privacy, because I know that there's like stricter laws that if a customer wants to, you have to delete all their data or something like that.
Yes. So I can talk about that from my company, and I can talk about what I know of from the industry. For my company, the way we acquire data, we actually already followed those new California statutes because the data is willingly, like the consumer signs off on their data being used when they sign up for these loyalty cards at the retailers. So we essentially, our main targeting mechanism sort of already circumvented that. It was actually a huge benefit for us when that passed. We actually got a lot of budgets shifted to us. From the industry, I would say it was a huge disruptor. A lot of people were trying to figure out, what do we do in this situation? And it becomes an ethical question. Do we just stop targeting California? Do we raise the standards on all of our media buys? And essentially what happened is the buyer always has the power in these situations, right? And so the companies buying the media essentially said, no, if this is going to be the highest bar that's set, all of our media must now essentially, meet these standards. And in general, that's what we saw media buying companies do.
Okay.
I will say this also, one other thing, if you're kind of digging into all of that, is to dig into all of the new standards with like iPhone and Google and all of the upgrades they're doing and the tracking. Just lots of information to learn there, and a lot of, improvements to data privacy going on in the industry.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there more states that are going to be implementing laws like that?
I have not heard of that. It was a surprise in the industry that it passed. So I don't know if that means others won't follow, others will follow.
Right.
I haven't heard anything on that.
Okay. All right. Other questions from the group? If you think of anything, just throw your hand up there and we will come back to you and come back around on that. I do want to throw this question out there, Kelsey, because you've judged for us before. You've been a competitor. You know what it takes to win. When you were looking at this from a judge's perspective, what would you expect to hear from a competitor that would set them apart? What do you think is something that they can add to their project that is going to give them an edge or make them above everybody else?
Can I ask a clarifying question first? Are
Sure.
people arguing like pro or con from an ethics standpoint, hyper personalization, or is it just presenting on the topic in general?
They are doing it's a marketing research project, and they are looking at putting together a hyper personalization approach. Mm-hmm. And addressing, they have to put together a strategic plan that will also improve the company's existing products, as well as address the approach of or address the concerns of privacy and ethics.
Yeah, what I would say is, Josh, I loved your question specifically on the California statutes. Honestly, I was a little bit surprised you even knew about that. So what I would say is knowing sort of the high level implications of how that, and again, the Google and iPhone upgrades affected just sort of, how shoppers can be tracked, et cetera. And almost preempting any question of, hey, you may be concerned about A or B, but this is not an issue because of X or Y. To be honest, because my company buys media in a way that is already complicit with all of those regulations, I'm not the most fluent in sort of exactly sort of what those would be. But I think to preempt it up front. Another thing is actually what could be interesting is, if you're sort of pitching your plan, to almost pitch yourselves as the safety experts. Hey, we hold our media to the highest standards, always within compliance of X, Y, and Z by doing A, B, and C, and almost brand yourselves, since this is kind of all tying around ethics, as the ethical company. In the upfront could be sort of an interesting spin, because it's a huge, huge concern for a lot of media buying companies.
All right. And when I did these projects back in the day, one of the things that I used to really encourage kids was to go to a small business and approach this? Because you've talked about Coca-Cola and Dollar General, and you talked about their advertising budgets, even $1 million being small. How would a smaller business accomplish something like this?
Oh, this is where honestly, buying media directly through the providers or the platform is almost a surefire way to play it safe. If you buy media from Facebook, you're automatically following all these rules. They are holding themselves to the highest standards. Same thing with Instagram, same thing with TikTok. They do not want to be caught up in any kind of scandal in any way. So if you simply, and it's relatively affordable if you buy direct. It's actually more expensive when you buy directly through an agency. So just to place a Facebook buy, I mean, anybody can go on and do that.
So small businesses, as long as they're targeting through whatever social media, Google Ads, Facebook, Instagram, they're going to be in good shape here.
Yeah. And this actually probably goes back to like what I mentioned, where you can just, I can send you the link. I can't remember what it's called. If you can hear the crying baby, I apologize. Yeah. But you can look up like Facebook targeting categories, and there's just a list out there. People interested in food, beverage, sports, etc. I would I would definitely, look at that list and work that right into your plans. Hey, we have a safe way to market doing our buys directly through Facebook and Instagram, which hold themselves to the highest caliber and standards. They have specific audiences that we can personalize. We want to go after Gen Zs who are interested in sports. You guys don't have to get down to the level that I was talking about with, purchase at Dollar General, et cetera, et cetera. But that could be a way to layer in some personalization in a safe way.
So if we keep talking about the budget and things like that, because that's another big part of this project, with hyper personalization, are you finding that it's more expensive for companies or less expensive for companies to put these campaigns together?
Much more expensive.
Much more expensive.
Yes. I would say so. Media is bought on a CPM basis. That's cost per million, and it's cost per million impressions, essentially. Sorry, actually, I think it's cost per thousand. Ooh, I should know that. It's cost per thousand. I've been off work for 10 weeks again, guys. Excuse me, my brain's gone. It's cost per thousand, so cost per thousand impressions. I would, without telling you numbers, I would assume my company sits at a 30% premium for our media campaigns. And it's because of the data we provide and that we can layer onto these campaigns. And then we can also use that information in the background to measure the campaigns and give a proven ROI. So.
And what type of ROI should they be looking for?
So in the industry, if you want to sound, most legit, it's actually called a ROAS, return on advertising spend. And there are two ways to measure a ROAS. It's ROAS or it's IROAS. So return on advertising spend or incremental return on advertising spend. A return on advertising spend basically looks at anybody who saw the media and essentially, what was the money that they purchased in the market divided by the cost of the campaign. You will see ROASs. I very regularly deliver a ROAS of $20 to $30. If you are looking at an IROAS, an incremental return on promotional spend, it is much, much lower. Range is still pretty big. I'd say my clients are happy if they get a $3. I've delivered up to a $12 IROAS. I would say we average around $6.50. I don't know how much or how feasible your plans have to be, but if you could put into your pitch that, whatever your company that you're pitching can deliver an IROAS, and you average, I would say over a $5, that's a really strong, data point to be able to use in the market.
All right, do we have any more questions from our group? Nothing so far. All right. All right. So you talked about the return on investment there, and the much higher budgets. Our companies, and I think they probably are, I'm just going to probably throw the obvious question out there, but are they experiencing the results that they want? Is this really getting them to where they need to be as a company?
It depends. You know, in a lot of places, we're delivering some great returns. In a lot of places, there are a lot of learnings. So, for example, I ran a campaign where the product was in, you know, only a quarter of that retailer's stores. And so, and the CPG I was working with was very specific. You know, we must only target 1 mile around each of these stores because of XYZ reasoning that they had that they thought was strategic, that you could argue if it was strategic or not. And it delivered a 20-cent ROAS. What does that mean? That meant for $100,000 campaign, only $20,000 of product was purchased. And it's because they set up constraints that were too limited. We couldn't find the right group of people within, and so we had to broaden our radius, and we didn't reach the right audiences. Actually, do you guys know about audience waterfalls? Do you guys talk about that in class?
I don't.
Okay.
So.
This would be if you're talking hyper personalization, talk about audience waterfalls. Unless, Mr. Benedict, you're going to tell me that the judges wouldn't know what this is after I explain it, in which case don't listen to me. But an audience waterfall is essentially looking at different layers in an audience strategy. So what happens is you start with the most niche, the most exact purchaser that you would want to get, and then you go broader and broader and broader. So what happens is you start with this really tiny pool of people, and you serve that media as much as possible to them. And if the media is pacing okay, then cool. We can just stay with this tiny group of people, and we're going to hit these people who are definitely going to buy our product. But if there's not enough of them, then we have another layer of that audience where it gets a little bit broader, and then another layer where it gets broader, another layer where it gets broader. So let's make up, for example, that this Coca-Cola campaign is around fall football. So we could have the first layer of our audience, which is the specific shopper that we want. This is Gen Zs who shop at Dollar General, who have bought Coca-Cola in the last 12 months. Okay, we exhausted that group of shoppers, and we're not going to run through our media budget, so we got to go broader. Okay, let's do Gen Zs at Dollar General who've bought any soft drink at Dollar General. Okay, now we've exhausted that. Going down, okay, you know, now they don't have to shop at Dollar General. They can shop anywhere, but they just have to have bought Coca-Cola or any other soft drink in the last 12 months. So you can see you go broader and broader. Other ways you could do this is maybe if you're not using, I'm talking as if, you know, you have purchase data. Another thing you could do is say, all right, let's target football enthusiasts, sports enthusiasts, all male Gen Zs that live in the state of Florida. You know, you can see, you can do whatever you want with these layers, but this would be a really interesting way to layer some strategy into your campaigns.
Okay.
Again, Benedict, unless you think this is too niche, in which case you can tell everybody behind my back to ignore that.
No, I actually like it, and I think it makes perfect sense. They may not want to use the industry term of audience waterfalls, but certainly find a way to incorporate that idea into their strategic planning. So I know sometimes terminology gets lost depending on who the judge is, but the concept still is solid. Josh, I saw your hand up again. Did you have another question for us?
Yeah, I was just curious, because you were talking about like the rate of return, I think of was like 20%. Like what's the average, or what, you know, obviously you want 100%, but what's typical for a company?
Sorry, rate of return.
Or not rate of return on investment. Sorry, return on investment.
So actually those were not percentages that they're, you calculate it as a percentage, you talk about it as a dollar. So the way that's talked about in the industry is a dollar. So let's say, again, for every $1 a company spends on media, they got $20 back. It would be called a $20 ROAS, not a 2,000%.
Yeah, something like
whatever.
that.
There is, I would say, unfortunately, there is not really a goal. You could Google what is the average ROAS in the industry, and I'm sure Google would tell you a number. What I would tell you is, depending on the industry that you're looking at, it's going to vary significantly. The other thing is, depending on what you're advertising, it's going to vary. If you're advertising generic Coca-Cola, family brand Coke, Diet Coke, Coke Zero, you're going to get a great ROAS. People buy that all the time. Remind them to get a Coke, great. But if you want them to buy new Coke, Starlight, very specific product, not many people are going to actually buy that, and your return is going to be much lower. It'll be more incremental probably, but it'll be lower. I would just go to Google if you want a number, though. Unfortunately, I don't know it. Google would tell you something.
All right. Do we have any other questions from the group? I know we had some people add during the session. And for those of you that joined us late, we are speaking to Kelsey Kitts Aamoth. She is a former student of mine, but she works for Quotient Technologies doing hyper-personalization or hyper-targeted consumer product campaigns. And she's been providing some examples with Coca-Cola and Dollar General in particular, but a lot of other applications for this. Scott, you have a question?
Yes. Hi. How would you say is the best way to create this hyper-personalized marketing campaign? Like, would you specifically go through social media, or how else would you apply this?
It would depend on what you're looking to do. I will say social media is probably the easiest way to do it at this point. But I would say, as far as what we would call media tactics, you could consider, depending on who your audience is and what you're looking to do, you could consider social media. You could consider mobile media. So think about the little banner ads that you get on your cell phone or within apps. Or you could also consider out-of-home media. More and more out-of-home media is digital. So think about like digital billboards or even, screens in gyms, screens in elevators. Digital out-of-home is actually a huge opportunity. So depending on sort of what you're marketing, I'll give an example. I did a campaign for a nasal spray one time, and we were able to target high pollen areas that were within a mile of a mass retailer. So Walmart, Target, or a club store, in cities where temperatures were below 50 degrees. So you could do sort of something like that, where you're personalizing, but off of the situation versus the shopper. I think that's different than what you're looking at right now, but more things you could kind of consider.
Kelsey, you keep giving all of those variables in there, and you sound like a sports announcer who's talking about statistics of a guy who bats 300 against left-handed pitchers on Saturdays when games start after 1 o'clock. It's just what in the world? But
and I will say, I feel like I'm kind of being generic because I don't know the specific situation you guys are looking at. If there's a specific project and I'm able to help more, once I have more details, I could probably give better context. So Mr. Benedict, if that's allowed, you're more than welcome to give out my email address. I'm happy to do kind of a one-off Zoom call to talk more specifics.
It's allowed as long as you don't judge the events. So if you're going to judge this year, then I can't put you in marketing research.
Okay, that works.
So, or at least not with anyone that you consulted or anything like that.
I like case studies anyways, you know that.
Yeah, I know.
It's always a case study, girl.
So, all right. Any other questions? All right, Kelsey, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking time out, and I really have enjoyed this conversation because having you as a student, there has been a lot of terms that you use that I was like, oh, I use that in class. So maybe she kept a little bit of that from me. I don't know.
Guys, I joined P&G because Mr. Benedict sold me on marketing. So,
well, that is a huge compliment. But I appreciate your time, and I will let you go now so you can have the rest of your evening free. And if I do get any responses, I will send some people your way.
Awesome. Sounds great.
All right. Thanks, Kelsey.
Bye.
Bye.